You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
So here's what we've got going on in Seattle. We've got 3 new rental rule laws. We know everybody's worked up about the whole eviction moratoriums expiring at the end of June. Everybody's kicking out. All right, we're going to go until September. We're going to keep ours in place until 2022. Let's just keep them in place until 2030 because, whatever. We've got these 3 new rental rules that are going to become law, but without our mayor's signature. Now, why isn't our mayor signing them? Well, for a couple of reasons. The first one is she doesn't believe that they're legally enforceable. The mayor doesn't believe they're legally enforceable, but the city council just, this is what we're doing. And they passed with heavy majority. I mean, like 1 dissenting a vote, that kind of thing. That's what we're talking about today. This is kind of how wonky Seattle politics has gotten. Our mayor is she's a federal prosecutor. She kind of knows the law. And she looked at these 3 bills and went, no, I don't think so. And then another reason that she didn't veto them is because she just figured she'd be overridden by the council, because the council just kind of does its own thing, whether it's for the betterment of the general population or not. But they think that they've got some special rules here. That's what we're going through. This is just one of those Seattle things, right? And we are the Seattle Real Estate Podcast, so that's what we're doing. Thanks so much for being here. If you're new, my name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies, and I read the news. All right, let's jump on into it. Seattle Council's new rental laws will become law without Mayor Jenny Durkan's signature. I read that and I was like, that's interesting. Let's check that out. How can that be? Here it is. Durkan declined to sign the bills last week, citing concerns about their legality. That is the first sentence in the second paragraph of this article. So we've got some legality issues. I mean, I'm a former federal prosecutor and now I'm the mayor of a pretty good sized city in Seattle. And I'm telling you that I don't think those are legally enforceable. Oof. She also declined to veto the bills, predicting the council would override any vetoes. We've got some politics going on, huh? Passed by the council earlier this month, the bills will provide a defense against most school year evictions of students and school employees, require landlords to offer lease renewals in many cases, and prevent certain post-pandemic evictions. The first bill will establish a defense against evictions during each school year for children and students, for their guardians, and for educators, including evictions for missed rent. Tenants will be able to cite the bill in eviction court. Okay, and the mayor is saying, this is a no-go. I'm not signing this. I am not putting my name to this. Do you think we might have a court case down the road where we test out the legality of these? I probably would if I was a landlord and I was being faced with this. I don't think this is legal. The second bill will require landlords to offer new leases to tenants with fixed-term leases before their existing leases expire, unless there are separate reasons the tenants can be evicted. The third bill will establish a defense against evictions based on rent debts incurred during the pandemic, with that period defined by Seattle's proclaimed COVID-19 emergency issued March 2020. So we've got these 3 bills that are going to go through. I've talked about the impact that this kind of legislation is having on the rental market, has had and will have, is having and will have. It's just kind of insanity. And yet here in the city of Seattle, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. We've got a city council that has just these socialist ideas as far as protecting the renters from the big bad landlord. And in a lot of cases, what the council doesn't understand is that the landlord in Seattle is 1, 2, 3, 4 rental property owner, and they are just not having this. And I've talked about this a bunch. And how do I know that these landlords are they're basically saying, yep, we don't want to keep our property anymore. We're thinking about selling it? Because I own a real estate brokerage and we're selling those properties right now. And we've got owner-occupied people who are like, well, I would keep this as a rental, but man, it's in Seattle. Nobody wants to have a rental property in Seattle. Now, you do have some phenomenal appreciation in Seattle, granted, all right, but you've got even better appreciation over here in Bellevue. And guess what? We don't have these kind of nonsensical restrictions. You sign a contract, you either pay the rent or you don't. It's as simple as that. Now you can throw in the whole, well, we had to close the city down and the state down for the pandemic. All right. But the landlords still have to do their thing. The owners still have to do their thing. They've still got to cover all these expenses. And I understand that federal money is coming. I mean, that has been the longstanding argument, right? We're just trying to get to that point of having the federal money come through, pay off a lot of these tenants' debts. But these kind of bills here, these are over the top. And when you've got a situation in the city of Seattle where you've got shootings increasing, you've got a homelessness issue that's nutty, you've got people, this is the latest news story, people are throwing rocks willy-nilly off of freeway overpasses onto cars below. You've got a lot of crazy stuff going on. And this is literally what the city council is working on. How about cleaning up some of those homeless encampments? How about getting those people some housing? I don't know. Maybe. What about working on cleaning up some of the crime going on, which seems like, and there was a triple shooting, I think, yesterday down in Rainier Valley, another multiple shooting. I mean, this is ongoing. And the best we can come up with are some bills. We're working on bills that the mayor says straight up aren't probably legally enforceable in court. That seems like an enormous waste of time to me. It does. But then I'm just a real estate broker. What would I know? Would I maybe possibly stand up and, I am a real estate appraiser. Would I possibly stand up in court on some of this stuff? In the past, I certainly would have as a professional witness. Sure. Property management law, that's not really my thing. It's more, supporting value on single family properties. That's kind of my specialty. And how does this impact value? This builder, this owner did this to the property, and then this person bought it down the road and they found out it had this, wrong deal with it. How much does that impact value? And, I give them my professional guess and we go from there. But yeah, literally in the city of Seattle, we've got so much emphasis on tenant advocacy that feels like it's a little bit out of control at this point in time. It just does. Tenant advocacy organizations supported the bills, shockingly, arguing the new protections will help tenants stay in their homes. Okay, yeah. A number of property owners opposed the bills, describing them as unfair and arguing that they will cause some small landlords to quit the rental market. That's the argument. And that's an argument that I think needs to be taken seriously. And it's an argument in a lot of these rental markets, not just Seattle, but across the United States, where they have protected the landlord and not necessarily the tenant. Since when do we have an eviction moratorium? How does that come up? It comes up because we've just got such a weird situation with the coronavirus, right? And now I think we're so on board with moratorium. Let's have it forever. That throwing in a couple of bills like this is just, this is Seattle. It's what we're doing. The council vote on the first bill was 6-1, while the votes on the second and the third bills were 5-2. They narrowly passed. No, they didn't. They passed, not surprisingly, they passed overwhelmingly. The bills will take effect next month. And I've had landlords reach out to me and say, this isn't the last straw, because the last straw was a while ago because of the stuff that the city council is doing. I'm on my way out of being a property owner in Seattle, and the already small supply of rental homes for the city of Seattle will just become smaller. And then what happens to those people who are renting as their supply of rental housing gets constricted? You take a guess. It's not that hard, right? Do you think rents maybe go up? In these bills, do you think landlords are going to say, oh, you work for the school? Interesting. Next. Do you think that might happen? It's not supposed to. We're supposed to take the very first application. But if you're a landlord, are you going to be like, okay, well, I guess if I lease to you, I can never get you out. That seems like a good idea. Does that seem like a good idea to you if you owned a house? Does that sound like a good idea to you if you're a property owner, that somebody tells you, that the city council tells you, a really narrow set of circumstances that you're not going to be able to get out of as far as your contract? No, this has gone way beyond the whole coronavirus thing. While we all have the same goals to prevent evictions, it is regrettable that city council has passed these bills despite receiving legal advice that they are unlikely to withstand legal challenge. Durkan wrote in a June 18th letter. All right. So the council is just doing stuff willy-nilly. Well, we kind of hope these stick. We hope these stick. And we're just going to, we understand we've been told, but we like what they are, and we came up with them all on our own. And this is just what we're doing. And the mayor's kind of like, yeah, that's probably not going to withstand legal challenge, so why are you doing it? These bills will yet again open the city up to legal liability and costs, spending valuable city resources that could be better spent actually helping vulnerable tenants to remain in their housing. Unfortunately, given the vote margins by the council, a veto is not viable, the mayor added. So number one, not legal. And number two, the city council passed them at a rate which the mayor can't really do jack about anyway. She's not able to, veto isn't viable, like she said. Several other rental laws passed by the council have been challenged in court. Judges in recent years have upheld limits on move-in fees and a requirement that landlords accept the first qualified applicant. That is literally one of the laws. That you have to accept the first applicant. So what do landlords do? Well, we're not accepting applications right now, but if you want to submit kind of a profile, we'll look at it. We'll get back to you. So landlords, property owners are in a position where they can kind of pick and choose at what point in time they want to start taking applications, because there's way more applicants than there are properties. Everybody kind of knows that. And there's different groups of people that have a tougher time. Groups of young men have a difficult time, because even though they might be responsible, they've just got kind of that reputation for not taking care of the property, having some parties, and being unresponsible. And that's not necessarily fair, but it's kind of out there. And so now you're going to have a situation where you've got teachers and how about people with kids in school? I mean, are you going to want to rent to somebody if you can't get them out during the school year? So and most of what we're talking about here, this will all be moot here very soon. Get the federal money through and clean up some of the outstanding tabs that tenants have as far as owing their landlord. This is kind of the way I see it happening. Initially, I didn't think that there would be a mechanism to actually get the funds, federal funds, into the coffers of the landlords. But it looks like that's actually going to happen. And so there's literally billions and billions of dollars that are allocated to help out these landlords. And I've talked about this a bunch. You guys are probably tired about hearing it. But I think as soon as some of that starts happening, all of these bills they're going to become, the whole stuff with the coronavirus, it's going to become kind of old hat. And we'll go back to a situation where we have normal evictions. And evictions happen all the time. And I've talked about this just a bunch. You're going to have a bunch of evictions. And how badly do you think the news headlines will be, that first family that, we lost our jobs during the pandemic? All right. But stuff happens and you got a deal. Sometimes you're going to lose your house. You're going to have to figure that out. That is part of dealing with life, being an adult. is you got to figure out solutions to really difficult problems that sometimes don't seem to have a logical ending. And that sounds kind of callous, and it sounds kind of maybe a little judgy, a little bit judgmental, but it's reality. And if you can't figure out a way to deal with that stuff, it's not going to be an easy road, because nobody's going to give this to you for free. You know what I mean? It's just, this is not how things work. The people that own homes, oftentimes, I don't know how many dozens and dozens and dozens of stories I've heard of people talking about what it took to get a rental property, the sacrifices they had to make to come up with that down payment to get that rental property. And then they had to feed it long enough that they could start to slowly increase those rents, because over time rents go up, typically, unless you're in the Great Recession, and then all bets are off. Those people struggled, they scrimped, they saved money towards that down payment, and then they sacrificed and scrimped and saved because their rental income wasn't enough to cover their mortgage payment. And they did that a while until they got to a point where their rents covered their property. And now they've got this kind of stuff going on. Well, you can't rent to this person. Oh, you got to rent to this person. Oh, and if they have this criteria, you can't kick them out, and you got to give them an automatic renewal. All of this stuff is unique to Seattle, just to Seattle. And I don't mean the suburbs surrounding, not Bellevue. We don't have that kind of stuff. When you own a rental asset, when you own an asset that is a rental property, you have way more control over who comes in your really expensive asset. Whereas in Seattle, you don't have that same control. And a lot of landlords are going, well, if I can sell my property and make some pretty darn good money coming out of Seattle, why wouldn't I do that? That's the argument. So whether the numbers actually stack up down the road of, hey, look at how many of these property owners left, you're seeing it happen. You are seeing the wheels turning in property owners' minds. Because I get emails all the time. We see it on the appraisal orders that Reynolds and Kline does. We see it on the properties that people are buying for investment property. I don't think we've had a single investment property purchase in Seattle since the pandemic. And we haven't had a ton before that. We've had some because a lot of our laws weren't this bad before. And when I say before, I mean, a while ago, years ago. They've just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And I think this whole coronavirus thing has really put a focal point on the difference between tenants and landlords. And I represent a lot of landlords. I just do, because on the real estate end of things, you're helping people who are buying, or you're helping people who are selling, or you're helping people manage their properties. So from those standpoints, it's always an ownership interest. On the tenant end of things, I think that City Hall here in Seattle has gone off the deep end, and they're trying to help these groups in a way that they think is realistic, but in reality. And the Seattle Times has written about that too. They've had, guest authors who are in real estate saying, yeah, the major byproduct we see is that this is going to have a constriction of the rental supply. And so much of the bills that we see here are intended for that big, huge corporate landlord that just owns thousands and thousands of units. Now, there are some of those in Seattle, but a lot of what we deal with on the Summit end and Reynolds and Kline end, because we don't deal in commercial, we deal with the mom and pop operators. And the stories are the same time and time and time again. Thinking about selling my property. I'm in the process of selling my property. Here's what I'm faced with as far as evicting a tenant. We're dealing with squatters. People are, becoming more and more familiar with squatter law during the whole coronavirus pandemic. That's another byproduct of the pandemic that I think was unintended. Those who don't feel like they need to obey the law as far as trespassing or, just breaking and entering and stealing another person's asset by squatting in that, they've become really brazen. I mean, they've become really out in the open of, I'm going to go pop some locks. I'm going to move my stuff in. I'm going to squat there for as long as I can. And if I get a timid landlord or a timid property manager, I'm just going to tell them I have the right to stay here. And they're going to have to believe me, and they're going to try and take me to court. And in some instances, people get upset and they take family members and they go there and they physically throw people out of their homes. It's crazy that we have to resort to that. But the police are stuck in a bind. They don't have the leases in front of them. They don't know who gave a deposit. They don't know who has legal, the legal ability to stay in that property. So their police are just like, figure that out in the courts. Well, normally that would be an okay scenario. It's not ideal when somebody's squatting in your house. But with the eviction moratoriums, pretty tough to get court dates, pretty tough to get this through. So I think you're seeing more people just taking the situation into their own hands and tossing people out. And I've had real estate investors send me, video tossing out that squatter. Now the squatters have I'm going to say 30% of the information they need. If they figured out a way to get a fake, check that had been cashed for the deposit, if they had all that stuff lined up, they'd be more believable. But they just don't. They don't understand the process. They know that they can just squat and take advantage of this. That's where they're at. And how do I know this? Because I've read a bunch of these stories and storylines and talked with people and talked with managers and property owners that have had the kind of thing happen. And it's pretty common. They'll throw out a couple of lines of BS that on the surface seem marginally acceptable. And you're like, yeah, that maybe could be, that might be, that could be. It just doesn't seem right. But if there's a question of doubt, that's when the cops are like, hey, this isn't our problem. You're going to have to let the courts settle this out. Let the courts figure this out. But there's just been a lot more of this stuff go on with the coronavirus because now you've got the whole eviction moratorium and now you've got these bills that the city of Seattle is throwing out there. And, how quick will the rental market react to this stuff happening? And how quickly will you see rents go up? I think it's happening right now. I think we saw, single family rents are up 5%. And apartments were down like 11, something like that. I mean, it was a significant number, but a lot of that had to do with, number one, there being an oversupply of rental apartments. There's been too many built. And then nobody wants to live in an apartment because they're usually located in more of an urban setting, where the urban setting is just now in Seattle opening up fully here in like a week. Literally, we're June 24th today. It's going to take a little bit for things to fully open. And then people will be like, I remember the downtown. And another major impact has been the homelessness and the increase in crime in said downtown urban areas where you've got all of these apartments located. The city's going to clean that up. They're they're working on it as we speak, because when those businesses all come back, there will be a lot of employees who are to their employers who are like, yeah, you want me to come back, but all those tents, I don't really want to deal with that. And you're seeing more and more and more private security. You're seeing private security in the chop zone. I mean, people are taking security into their own hands, and they're just not willing to wait for the police to come because guess what? The police are at record low numbers, and we've got more population here than we've had in the past. And they don't have the ability to respond to all the calls. Portland police, they're just going to respond. They're basically not going to do any traffic stops except the most major ones where somebody's safety is at stake. And a couple of the arguments there is the mayor has said in Portland, well, this impacts people of color the most. All right. So then you don't figure out the actions going into that by the people of color. You don't figure out, well, why is it that they're being pulled over? I mean, are we just racially profiling here? Or is it a case of they don't follow the rules as well as other groups? There's some of that, of course, in there. But what we're doing is we're just taking that situation and okay, so don't pull them over. Don't pull them over. And part of the argument by the police department, they didn't go down the whole, this is an unequal situation, their equity isn't here. The police department basically said, we don't have enough guys to cover all these stops, so we're going to stop doing that. So in downtown, you've got situations like that. But as we expand, as we go back to work, as we go back to normal, as kids go back to school, some of these areas like the downtown with the high rises in it, you're going to have an increase in rents, and you're also going to have a lot of folks complaining about how things get so bad in downtown during the pandemic. People just, unless you're watching a podcast like this, and I cover this a lot, you wouldn't really realize that downtown is, it's taken a little bit of a rougher turn. But if you follow the news, you're like, wow, another shooting, another stabbing. Ooh, not good. One of my kids' girlfriends just took a job in Northgate. And so I asked, well, what's the name of the school? And so I looked it up on, my Google machine, and I'm like, oh, geez, there was a stabbing, or no, what was it? It was 7 blocks away. There was a dead body found on the side of the road on Highway 99. That's it. But it was a dead body from a shooting. So, I mean, it's an explainable murder. But that's 7 blocks away from her school. And I'm like, do you feel safe going to work at that school? School shall remain unnamed. But it's a small private school. And she said, yeah, there's a big gate out in front. And I was like, your school's fully gated? She goes, yeah, it's safe. Kind of, okay. Well, they usually put gates around, schools and areas that things aren't quite so safe, and they're trying to keep the bad man out. We didn't really have that talk, but I, told her, hey, I don't want to diss on your new job. I don't want to, crap on your new job, but I also want you to be safe. So I think there's going to be a lot of those conversations that are going to be happening more so than a lot of this is that, this bill taking effect, and rents are going to go up. Rents are going to go up. And the people on the city council who don't take legal advice from their former federal prosecutor, attorney, mayor, they're probably not going to understand why rents are going up, but they will. So that's where I sit. And so then the folks that are, on the very first line to lose their jobs and be evicted from their homes because they can't pay their rents, those are the people that all of these bills are going to basically work against. That's kind of the way I see it. And that sucks because folks just don't understand real estate if you haven't been in it. And none of our city council has a background in real estate. They don't have a background in small business. So it's kind of like, the whole defund the police thing. These city council members sit around and, let's defund the police by 50%, a number that comes out of nowhere. And yet the mayors of these progressive cities are like, ooh, that's not such a good call. Maybe let's defund the police by like 10%. Let's like 8%. Oh, and then when folks aren't really looking, we're just going to slide that money right back to the police department. Because guess what? Crime is rising, not because we defunded the police, probably a little bit of that, but because crime is rising. I mean, violent crime is going up. And that's not a gross exaggeration. It's happening all across the United States. So you need more police on the ground. You need less restrictions on the rental housing market. That's all I can say, because that's kind of where it's at. The beauty of listening to a podcast is you can go back and listen to it. Was Sean right or wrong? Oh, the jury's out. Will rents skyrocket? Who knows? Will they go up? I don't think they're going down. So this is kind of an easy prediction, right? I got a 50-50. Do they go up? Do they go down? Because they won't stay the same. I think they're going up. Just like property values are. Just like taxes are. Everything's going up. Price of Everything has gone up, hasn't it? But that's a whole nother podcast. We can talk about that at another time. All right, that's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for being part of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. I will catch up with you guys soon. Until then, stay safe. We'll talk then. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.